a lot in front of me. I'm going to be basically highlighting most of what's covered. I'm going to omit some of the things that aren't necessarily game-breaking, some of the things that aren't necessarily going to impact us too much. But definitely dive in and get all this taken care of. So today, July 16th, we're looking at patch 11. It's finally here. Some of the patch highlights that Bethesda's calling out are the power armor improvements, the item description makeover, nuclear winter balance changes, better experiences for new players, the return of the punch bowl. I'm not entirely sure why they're highlighting the punch bowl so much throughout this patch, like it's an inside joke between people in the company, I don't know. But to start off, we're looking at the power armor improvements. They definitely worked a lot on this. So they mentioned, people should be encountering fewer issues. Unfortunately, I'm going to be a little sad now that I'm not going to see as many power armor glitches, whether it's the tiny version of the power armor, or if it's the elongated, stretched out, weird vacuum-looking power armor sets. Honestly, I think those are hilarious. So I'll be a little upset I won't see them as much. I'm sure that things will probably sneak in. For all we know, instead of tiny power armor, we might get a larger glitch or something like that, but that's that. They also mention, as a PSA, a one-time side effect. People might notice as they're logging in, they might have their power armor pieces being unequipped or moved from their stash to their inventory or vice versa. People logging in will notice that. They also mention that you might receive additional power armor chassis or armor pieces. That was a result in stuff not saving correctly in the past. So when you originally collected them, instead of them actually showing up, now they're going to be showing up at a later date. So now when you log in, you might get some stuff that you don't recognize. That could have been from months ago, who knows. And also, as a little PSA, as you're logging in, characters might have been moved to the train station. I know some people already said that, they weigh 1,100 pounds now that they have all their chassis moved into their inventory. So as you crawl around through the station, you can figure out how to get rid of your weight issues. Now for some other updates we're looking at, we have the art and graphics updates. One of the things that I find funny is the Atomic Shop. They're saying that they're reworking the featured screen, and now many more items and offers will now appear at once. So to me, that's just kind of funny. It's like, here, buy our stuff. Look at more items in our catalog as opposed to just one or, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the screen. So now also camp crafting and workshops got some fixes. I would say the hugest fix for me personally is the bulk junk update. So now the scrap all junk option no longer automatically scraps bulk junk at workbenches, which is great. I don't know how many times I've been making bulk, or let's say I go to a station, I buy bulk that I'm kind of short on, and then I might pick up a couple of things along the way home, then I go home, scrap it, and then guess what? My bulk item is scrapped and I have to re-bulk it. It's happened to me countless times. Again, talking about the punch bowl, I personally never used the punch bowl, but they're saying party on. Players can once again add alcohol to or drink alcohol from punch bowls. So that should be interesting. House party at my camp later on. Design and gameplay got some good updates. So first off, they're talking about loot. Legendary items dropped as loot by a legendary enemy will now appear much quicker on that enemy's corpse. So I don't know how many times I run West Tech or let's say White Springs or anywhere in general that I kill a legendary and I stare at its inventory. I just stare at it, stare at it, stare at it, stare at it, and then finally something pops up. This can also be good for White Springs. White Springs, non-marked legendary creatures that drop legendary loot. Sometimes I look at their stash and then run away, and then when I find myself coming back to the same body, it might actually have a legendary, so that's good. Hopefully that helps out a lot. additional loot stuff, like Deathclaws will now have a chance to drop Deathclaw hides. So anybody looking to collect that will finally be able to. Another huge update they're talking about is respawning. So it says, dying in an interior location, such as the burrows, now automatically respawns players near where they enter that location. And then at the end, in most cases. Anybody following the stream knows that a lot of times I'll be in a nuke silo, die, and I don't get to spawn at the nuke silo. I get to spawn at 76, or anywhere but 70, or anywhere but the silos. So hopefully that helps with that issue. I understand that to be an issue related to your weight and being over encumbered, even if you're 100 pounds over what it says your over encumbrance is. So let's see if that actually helps. A couple other things, they talk about spoilage. So now all raw food items and fluxes now last 50% longer before spoiling. That's great. So now definitely won't have to spend as much time trying to go back and forth, finding different foods. If I can stock up on them, they don't spoil as long. And also fast traveling will now not affect condition loss. I guess I've personally noticed that a few times. Fast traveling between camps or something like that, looking for vendors. I never really put two and two together, but sometimes I'm like, wait, why did that spoil so long? So apparently fast traveling was affecting that. And one thing that I find interesting is apparently now stealth boys can now be used while wearing power armor. So this big, clunky armor that you have on is going to go completely invisible, which adding to the, variety of things you can do with power armor, I guess. Going on to user interface, one of the things that I find cool is now for combat, a slight blurring effect now appears on screen when taking damage to better indicate that the character is experiencing pain. So I personally, I know a few others have had weird concussion vision. Even like a few days ago, we were doing the Scorch Beast Queen, and a few people all had this weird, like, blurry screen for no reason. So I hope that this new slight blurring effect doesn't cause any future issues. Probably will. Now, a huge UI update is item descriptions. Additional information is now displayed in the menus for legendary items, mods, and recipes. So now finally, legendaries will display all of its legendary attributes instead of just the first. So that's huge. So now we can actually, just off the bat, see things in people's inventories. So like they fixed it for player vending where you could inspect and all that, but when you were trading people, you can't inspect. When you hit the inspect button, it would just change it to the requested items or whatever you're giving them. So that's good. Now we can finally see that. So I'm super excited about that. Recipes and mods have a similar thing added to it. Another UI update, the map. The map now has an improved marker ordering. So now if there's multiple things on top of each other, you should be able to, say, fast travel to where you want or not have any issues if things are on top of each other or people are on top of each other in a certain area. One thing I find cool as well is the Purveyor will now have previews for their weapons and armor models. So a nice little update there. But they didn't necessarily just set it and forget it. They're making some more updates to Purveyor, so maybe some more future updates to Purveyor will be coming out. And a big thing that I'm actually a little excited for is for the power armor, you'll be able to enable the power armor HUD. I personally don't use power armor. One of the reasons I'm not a fan of power armor is because of the UI that pops up. So being able to hide, the HUD will maybe give me an opportunity to start using power armor. So let's see. And they also mentioned that you can disable that setting and it'll affect when you go to your Pip-Boy, it'll show you the Quick Boy. So that's good. So now for new players got some awesome gameplay improvements. One of the ones that I think is a little double-sided are the challenges. They mentioned that the rewards, instead of giving you atoms, will give these new players in early game challenges rewards like aid, weapons, armor, and more. So I think that's a little double-sided because now they're missing out on early game atoms. So now they're indirectly forcing people to, start buying more atoms because they're not collecting as many atoms early game, so that's just a little speculation. They also mentioned that you have to be at least level 15 or higher to receive diseases. That's also good. They talk about enemy difficulties have been adjusted. For example, a few places in the Ash Heap, like Belching Betty, Ash Forge, and the Rusty Pick, now have level 15 to 20s in that area instead of up to 35s. Savage Divide got in multiple areas. It says that they went from level 15 to 99. I personally have never seen a level 99. But I do find it interesting that they're saying level 15 to 99 is now 15 to 25. So again, kind of balancing out these areas. And then a few areas in the Toxic Valley are going from 10 to 25 to 10 to 15. So again, just balancing this out. They're making more specific areas for certain levels, these lower levels, so that's good. So again, kind of giving quality of life to these earlier players, helping kind of the population, getting people to not feel as battered as soon as they start the game. Another one I think is a nice fix. Fertile soil now triggers in a smaller area. I think it's a nice fix, not just for new players. There's plenty of times that I've been in the area, kind of not even too close to the area, and it'll say fertile soil has triggered, so that's kind of good. Another big one for new players is the for fast traveling, the cap cost has been reduced for players under level 25. I'm personally a fan because I think now that they can spend those savings at our vending machines instead of spending all that, cost on their travels, so that's good. So another big part of this update is the nuclear winter balances. I'm very excited for this. First and foremost, let's look at frog legs. Jumping in a rapid succession now temporarily reduces maximum jump height and requires a short rest to recuperate. I'm super excited for this, but from what I've already seen, they could have nerfed it a little harder, but honestly, anything to kind of start, kind of like nerfing it and not allowing people to abuse it. Like, I keep referring to people's Y buttons must be mashed to all hell, because I've seen people that as soon as they get into a fight, they just jump. So now it's going to have to be a little bit more strategic as opposed to depending on that. So that's good. Master Perk cards got some balance changes and damage reductions. So all the various Master Perks and then Demo Expert have been reduced, so that's good. They talk about they thought they were too powerful, and they were beginning to feel more like required picks than options. So that's good. They're starting to, do these balances. I honestly expected this. Can't remember if it was a 40% damage buff per the master cards, or if it was more. I think it was 40%. But that's good. So now you don't have to worry about running into somebody that has all these right perks, and then you don't stand a chance, even if you're using the same gun, hitting them the same amount of times. They'll be able to kill you in half the time. So that's good. They're balancing, they're refining these different perks. They talk about weapons. So for explosive weapons, they greatly increase the damage that explosive weapons deal against camps, so that's good in structures. So I've also noticed that there's more camp fights going on. I don't think this game will ever turn into Fortnite in terms of people setting up buildings on the fly. It's good to know that you'll be able to actually use explosive weapons against them a little more effectively. Laser auto pistols apparently no longer fire multiple beams per shot. I never really used the auto pistol, but if it's firing multiple beams per shot, I can imagine that being a little OP if they all individually do damage. And another weapon that they mention is the scoped hunting rifle. Now has its magazine reduced from 5 to 1, but it didn't affect its DPS apparently, so that's good. So something like that makes me speculate that maybe future magazine or fire rate changes might come independently of, let's say, adventure mode. So that's good. If they keep working on refining, DPS or fire rate or magazine size, that's just, again, them going through and balancing these things out, giving more of an even playing field, making guns more feasible. I mean, I personally am a fan of buffing up instead of nerfing down, but so far what they're doing doesn't seem too bad in terms of bringing the nerf hammer down. So now back to adventure mode and survival mode. They talk about multiple environmental fixes, where they fixed different areas where enemies could become stuck. They fixed objects clipping into terrain. They also fixed objects causing players to become stuck, so that's good. My question is, will we still run into bases clipping into the world? Run into a few bases where you go sit on a chair next to a rock or something, and then you stand up, and all of a sudden you're in a base underground. So that could be also affecting that. And they also mentioned some other graphical fixes. Let's see what else we got here. We got camp crafting and workshop. They got various fixes. So in terms of camps, there was a lot of floating errors when you're trying to place your blueprint. I've run into that in the past. I haven't moved my base in a little bit. I considered making more of a mobile base on one of my other characters so I could just plop it down wherever I need to, but the floating errors definitely discouraged me. They also had some rare issues that prevented players from building in their camp. I've heard of this, where even if you're not full and you're trying to build something, it wouldn't let you. So again, that's good. The cooking stove, the red enamel variant of the cooking stove, now correctly indicates that it's an atomic shop item in the build menu. I had someone place one for me, so when I log in, let's see if it actually stays at my base. And apparently, there was an exploit allowing players to place a camp in an unintended area in Charleston. I'm not really sure why they're referring to that as an exploit. Me personally, I think you should be able to place your bases in more spots than they're allowing you to. They're calling it quest-related areas. That's why you can't place them everywhere, but hey, it is what it is. I still want to know, what about base clipping? But base clipping, I think, is in the foundation section. They talk about how foundations can no longer be placed entirely underground. And they talk about some of these issues resulting in errors like part of the structure would be inaccessible when you try to place it. So they're saying underground. I don't know if through a rock in a mountain face or something like that also counts for this. So again, is this getting rid of base clipping? Because some of those bases are very interesting. Even if they don't want people clipping into the world, it's definitely funny to run into some of them. So what else we got in terms of camp crafting and workshops? We have, I've had this happen to me. For the modify, repeatedly selecting and deselecting objects in the modify menu will no longer sometimes cause the player to become stuck editing an object. I've had this happen to me when I was placing crops. I was selecting, deselecting, and trying to move it and rotate, let's say, corn to fit in a certain spot, and it just wasn't working, and I knew, I met all the parameters, there was dirt underneath, but there was just some weird issue that I wouldn't place. I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down, and got stuck. And I had to basically leave the server and come back. So that's good that they fixed that. Moving on to challenges. A few challenge updates they got going on here, but for example, one that I think is good is kind of an assist for the challenges that require players to kill creatures. So now you can kind of, instead of having to kill, let's say, a Mirelurk Queen, instead of having to have the final blow, as long as you do enough damage to earn experience, you'll get credit for that. So that's good. Get those challenges done. A few challenges to badges. For example, fixed an issue preventing several musician possum badges, some challenges from completing correctly when playing various instruments. So just if you're trying to get challenges and you weren't able to before, now you can get a couple of them. They removed several photographer possum badge sub-challenges that were difficult to complete. I kind of gave up on those, but it's good that they're saying, okay, if these are difficult to complete, then let's not even do that. Now we also have some enemy changes. And I think this is a funny common bug, and I just ran into this yesterday and multiple times over, but for AI, implemented an improvement to help reduce cases where creatures could become stuck in a non-responsive state. Just last night, I ran into a Gutsy in one of the silos, and he wasn't attacking. He was just behind a table, staring at me, floating around, didn't run away, didn't do anything, so apparently that's going to be addressed. They also mention anglers. Fix an issue that could cause anglers to flee from players it could not reach rather than using its range attacks. I think that's good, not specifically for anglers, but overall AI tracking needs some work. Sometimes, you know, you can just hide behind something and they don't know what to do and they'll just kind of run away. I think one of the weirdest updates they also have is sentry bots. Legendary sentry bots no longer explode twice on death. I've never run into a legendary sentry that's exploded twice back to back, but you can imagine it has its self-destruct mode and then it also has its explode because it's a robot that's legendary. Although I've ran into super mutants that explode upon death, so that's also funny. The last one for enemies, they mentioned ticks. Ticks no longer are full of blood of bloodless enemies or structures, so that's good for collecting tick blood. I've definitely run into ticks attacking a robot or something like that, and all of a sudden they become engorged with blood. You go hit them, they explode, you get nothing. So that's good, they're fixing that. There are a bunch of item fixes. First off, I was worried because the first item they mentioned are bloodied weapons. I was like, oh god, tell me they're going to nerf bloodied already. Well, they didn't. What they wound up doing is they fixed the display for the correct amount of damage. So as you're healing or taking more damage and have lower health, it'll accurately show you how much damage you should be doing. Some of the other item fixes that they have, apparently there was an exploit that would cause magazines or bobbleheads to become duplicated. I never put two and two together, but I've seen plenty of camps with a lot of duplicate magazines or bobbleheads. And I don't know if certain bobbleheads or magazines have higher spawn rates, but I guess maybe some of those were duped, whether intentionally or not intentionally. They also talk about an exploit. Address an exploit that could prevent the player from being killed by radiation damage. So let's keep that in mind. And another update for an item that I'm hearing that it's broken. The handmade rifle had its drum magazine mod updated so it correctly displays the ammo capacity that was increased by 50%. Apparently it's broken now, so I can imagine a hotfix coming out maybe soon for that. One of the biggest updates I would say is iguana soup. Now you need iguana bits to craft iguana soup instead of squirrel bits. I don't know how that has gone on long as it has. Another useful update, anybody using plasma weapons, apparently there was an issue that could cause plasma weapons to pass through a target without dealing damage to them. That's good if anybody's using plasma weapons. There are various power armor updates as well. One of the biggest ones I would say, broken pieces of armor will now remain equipped when exiting power armor, so that's good. So you're not getting out and then something breaks and all of a sudden you have, let's say, 15 pounds of a left arm or whatever it is or more. Another one is repeatedly entering and exiting sets of power armor will no longer cause the player to become stuck in their power armor. I'm not sure why you'd be repeatedly entering and exiting, but whatever. Also, stim packs can no longer be used if the player's health is already full while wearing power armor, so that's good. So if you misclick and you go to heal, if you're full, you shouldn't anymore waste any of these. Let's see. And last kind of item adjustment I found interesting was weapons and oil spills. So now apparently you can ignite oil spills by using other weapons that you weren't able to before. Moving on to quests and events. I think this is kind of a good update again, kind of considering the overall game mechanics and how things are affected. They talk about defend Minoga power plant, so now the attackers will approach from the outskirts of the workshop and kind of more realistic, you know, enemies are spawning and charging at you from afar as opposed to spawning directly underneath you or just on the opposite wall of you. It's kind of like you're actually getting attacked at a workshop, so that's good. I'm very excited for free range getting an update. It said they addressed several issues that could block Brahmin movement during free range event. So I understand as soon as you start free range, let's just say by the hotel near Harper's Ferry, you can get stuck at the beginning just because they're waiting for the first wave of creatures to come in and attack them. But I think things like there's tents blocking the way or there's various random items that spawn blocking them, so that's good that they're fixing that. Free range should be a little bit more streamlined, hopefully. Line in the Sand got some updates. A few other things got updates. Project Paradise got some updates. I think the biggest issue with Project Paradise getting an update is it says, fixed an issue causing enemies to spawn continuously during the Project Paradise event. I don't know how many Project Paradises we've ran, and we don't have enough enemies spawning. They're just not spawning. So now, if there was an issue of them infinitely spawning, are we not going to be able to get 3 out of 3s in different rooms because, let's say, deer aren't spawning? Like, what's the takeaway from this? There's a few other quests and events that got some, nothing too major. Performance and stability. So, loading, and I think this takes a little bit of effort, but they said you can get caught in an infinite loading screen while attempting to report a player while loading into a world. So I don't know who loads into a world, I guess after leaving another world, pauses the game, goes to their recent, and then tries to report them. Like, this is a very specific issue, but whatever. Performance, they talk about reduces the time it takes to return to the main menu after leaving a world. That's great. So now instead of, you spawning, trying to like leave a world and go to a new world or whatever the case is, it should be a little bit more streamlined. And they also mentioned performance, addressed a performance issue relating to quest items. So overall performance increase, hopefully. Sound has a few fixes, but I would say the major takeaway from sound fixes is Gunfire. Fixed an issue in all game modes that could cause gunfire sound effects to loop endlessly. So no longer should we hear the, gun glitch where it just keeps going and going and going for nuclear winter, for adventure, everything. So that's good. Especially when we're running Scorch Beast Queen, experience runs, and we're going to be there for 20 plus minutes. And then as soon as you get there, there's just an infinite loop of gunfire. Another nice one is legendary exchange machines have their volumes reduced. I guess it was a little loud, nothing crazy, but you would turn on a legendary exchange machine and all of a sudden it would click very loudly, so that's good. There are a bunch of UI fixes. And I find it funny because the first one they talk about is general. Fix typos across several areas of the game. These patch notes have quite a few typos, so, hey, nobody's perfect, right? The Atomic Shop got some UI fixes. Appearance got some fixes. Combat got some fixes. I think this one's pretty nice. Using the quick swap button now more consistently switches to an alternative weapon and no longer swaps to broken or unusable weapons. So that's good. So you don't have to worry about a glitch where it's not going to let you use the last weapon. It keeps in mind if it's broken or unusable. And I definitely think this is kind of a game-breaking one. They mentioned that the controls says on Xbox, resetting the controls to default settings and then joining a survival mode world no longer sometimes prevents the player from accessing containers or workbenches. So apparently if you mess with your settings on your controller and went back to default and went into survival, you couldn't access containers or workbenches. That's good that they fixed that because that's kind of game breaking. You go into a world and you can't access anything. Another good one to talk about is drop loot. The objective to retrieve your drop loot that appears on death now only completes once all drop loot has been taken. I think that's a little double-sided. Sometimes I pick up a little more than I want, and I only pick up half the stuff, and I want to leave the rest. So now I'm going to infinitely have a quest to go pick up my loot. So I guess it's going to be an extra step. I'm going to have to pick up everything and then drop what I don't want. One of the ones that I thought was a little funny is the map got a couple updates. Well, the funny one to me is the large nuke zone will no longer appear over a normal nuke zone indicator on the map after switching to adventure mode. I thought that was funny when you would join a world and there's a giant nuke zone on the map. Another map update that they said is they adjusted the wanted icons so they are less likely to prevent interactions with nearby map markers. I think that's good. Sometimes I would try to spawn at White Spring Station. If somebody was wanted there, you would go to their name as opposed to spawning there. Another one that I think doesn't really make too much sense to me, they talk about pacifist mode. No longer appears enabled for characters below level 5 in adventure mode after playing a nuclear winter match. So it's my understanding that if you're below level 5, you can't get attacked and you are, let's say, permanently in pacifist mode. But this line here is basically saying if you go play nuclear winter and you come back, you're no longer going to be in adventure mode, so are you fair game? Sorry, you're not in pacifist mode, so are you going to be fair game to anybody coming by? That one's a little questionable to me. I also think one that's going to help so much, they talk about respawning. Players can now correctly respawn at their camps when they're over encumbered. So that's a huge issue for me. When I'm over encumbered, I'm stuck spawning to 76, then sifting through my stuff, trying to clear weight, and then going to wherever I want. Now we can finally spawn at their camps. I think a while back I saw a loading screen that said something like, in the event of your untimely demise, you'll be able to spawn at a nearby location, your camp, or Vault 76. But I was never able to spawn at my camp half these times. It was just a forced spawn at 76, so again, that's going to help out a lot. Hopefully there's no bugs with that. I also noticed they talk about sorting through spoil options. It wasn't working before, but now you'll be able to sort by spoil more accurately. And now it places the lowest condition items at the top of the list, so it's easier to find items that are nearly expired. So that's good. So you'll be able to take care of that. They also mentioned multiple vending fixes. I think one of the ones that impacted me personally the most is they say, fix an issue that can prevent players from scrolling through their inventory to mark additional items for sale in a vending machine. I think multiple people have also ran into this. You go to put something for sale, after your vending machine has completely cleared, you try to go to your next item and it keeps snapping you back up and you can't scroll. So that's good that they're fixing that. They also talk about they fixed an issue where vending information is incorrectly cleared when a character is loaded. And I think this refers to times that I've seen people joining a world and then they have nothing for sale. And then 10 minutes later they have something for sale, or you go to their base and you actually see a lot of stuff for sale. They also mentioned fixed an issue where sometimes players would remain in the player vending machine, the menu, if the camp was moved or the vending machine was scrapped or stored. So that sounds a little game breaking if you're just kind of locked into place. Onto nuclear winter bug fixes. There's a few visual fixes. They talk about smoke effects, nuclear blast visual effects. Clouds in the storm should now appropriately show, so that's good. One of the ones that I think is cool, it says grass now visually burns after the storm passes over the player. I've never really noticed that it's actually burning, so maybe we'll notice it now. There's a couple of like odd ones that I've also noticed for their camp updates. They talk about lamps. When you place a lamp in a player's camp, it can no longer be activated during nuclear winter. The Hero of the Wasteland statue can no longer be activated during nuclear winter. So I don't know who's going into nuclear winter and messing around with these camps that they're like, hey, can you turn the lights off when this guy comes up? Like, it's kind of a little weird, but hey, whatever. Maybe that's also causing some memory leaks or instability, I'm not sure. They also mentioned turrets can now correctly deal damage to enemy structures that were built using the quick kit. That's good. I never actually personally thought of placing a turret specifically when I see a camp, so it'll actually destroy the camp, hopefully. Some of the environmental ones that they talk about is duffel bags. So now players can now walk through duffel bags. You're not going to get stuck on them anymore, so that's good. New River Gorge. They talk about objects in that location that would cause people to get stuck, so that's also another good fix. Moving on to some of the items in Nuclear Winter. Talk about how laser rifles are now correctly benefiting from the Commando perk rather than the Rifleman perk. I had no idea that was happening, so now laser rifles should become a little stronger. But don't forget, the Master perks have also been revamped and not doing as much damage as before. Also, if you get DC'd, you're going to drop a duffel bag. Multiple people have DC'd in front of me and didn't drop anything, so now that's good. Maybe we can pick through their stuff and get something decent. Apparently there was also an exploit with the Grognak the Barbarian magazine. I'm not sure what that exploit was, but hey, anything to fix exploits, right? There's also a few power armor related issues relating to animation, Are people sliding or floating when entering power armor, or different paints popping up? So again, just kind of combing through bugs, fixing them as they come along. I think one of the performance and stability things that they fixed, and I think it was terrible. So apparently login. Fix an issue that could cause some players to become logged out after every nuclear winter match. That would be so bad. After every game, you get logged out. Also talk about stability and performance. Talking about people, could be disconnected when building their camps. And they also implemented an improvement affecting memory issues. So like, there's like memory leaks or anything like that, it's good because overall, they're fixing performance. That's good. In terms of perks, there's a few, but one that I find kind of funny is the Last Laugh perk. Grenades dropped when a player with Last Laugh is down can no longer damage the player that dropped them. So if you get downed and you drop a grenade from that perk, you're not going to insta-kill yourself. You're going to be able to actually maybe survive, kill the guy, and then have a teammate revive you, so that's good. And home stretch, we got some UI fixes. Bunch of UI fixes, but a couple of them that are important are the exploits. So apparently addressed an exploit related to reviving another player. I'm not sure what that means. That can be anything from that person insta-died to that person that infinite health or something, not really sure. One that I'm kind of concerned about is nameplates. They talk about nameplates saying enemy nameplates and health now only appear to a player who have damaged them within the last 5 seconds. So does that mean we can't scout anymore? So I think it's a little odd when you're looking at a mountain and you see somebody on the opposite side of the mountain for a second. So if that's the bug that they're fixing, that's good. But now, what if I'm staring at a bush with my gun and I don't see a person's name because of this fix? I mean, we'll find out soon when we play Nuclear Winter, but I hope that's not the case. Also, team nameplates will no longer follow players when they are spectating. So I think me spectating my teammates and then my body / the nameplate following them and dropping behind them is what they're referring to. Hopefully they fix that. There's a couple of revive issues that they also mentioned. They fixed an issue that could cause a revive attempt to fail even though it appeared successful. Fixed a rare issue where players could be revived with incorrect amounts of health. But I'm curious to know, will they fix revive interruptions? So just yesterday, somebody was getting revived, somebody ran in front of that person reviving them, and that was enough to cause the revive to cancel, and then they died. So that basically wraps up all these pages of notes. A lot of notes, a lot of good stuff, good amount of stuff. I was kind of worried that they were going to focus too much on Nuclear Winter and not other things, but they made it very new player friendly with their updates. They made a lot of UI fixes, a lot of gameplay fixes, a lot of, let's say, quality of life stuff, or just things that, needed to happen. So like you can see legendary attributes without inspecting them or without going through a weird, you have to go to their vending machine as opposed to trading them, or just stuff like scrapping all junk. A big one I would say is frog legs, but like I said before, they could have totally nerfed that a little more. But it's good. A lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. When I log in, I'm going to be probably over encumbered at some station because of invisible power armor pieces that I've received, but this is all good stuff. So 40 minutes later, I've gone through 14 pages, all these fixes. Again, I'm going to say legendary item description, frog legs being patched, various UI fixes, performance stuff, a lot of good stuff. I do hope that they continue to address bugs the same way they did. I mean, they were quiet for a little bit, for a few weeks, but they definitely hit a home run with a lot of these things. I mean, it's a good time to join the game with all these friendly updates they made for new players. I mean, like I even said, something as simple as, you're under level 25 and it costs less to fast travel. Hey, those caps towards some vending machines. Oh my god. Oh, because he has power armor. Hey, listen, they did not patch power armor. Oh, that is... Alright, I'm just gonna watch this person the rest of the game. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
This is amazing.
No, the anger just dissipates as soon as you see them
Oh
fine
my
legs.
god. Oh my god.
Yes. Yes.
Fucking Toy Story here. Oh my god.
Oh my god.